Cole raised his glass over my own pot roast. He toasted the old man's money. Nobody laughed harder than my daughter. They'd already picked a name for a store I hadn't agreed to fund. They'd already measured my shop for a for sale sign. My daughter's husband told his business partner it was basically already his. He didn't know the yard stopped being mine 2 years before he raised that glass. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. I folded one page, set it on the tablecloth by my plate, smoothed it flat with 2 fingers, and waited. Waited for someone to finally read it. But before the page, on the tablecloth, there was a Tuesday dinner in March and a toast I let finish. My name is Owen Garrity. I am 73 years old. I built wooden boats in Cutters Notch, Maine for 43 years. The last 22 I owned the yard myself. I did not raise my voice at that dinner. I have never needed to. Cole Paget stood up at the head of my table, in my house, with a glass of my wine. He toasted the old man's money like it was already poured into his hands. Renee laughed. My grandson Sam, 9 years old, looked at his plate like he wanted to disappear into it. I sat there, fork still in the roast, and let the toast finish. Every word of it. A man who cuts off a fool mid-sentence never learns exactly how much rope that fool intends to use. To new beginnings, Cole said, and to the old man's money making them happen. He clinked his glass against Renee's. She clinked back. Nobody clinked with me. I hadn't lifted my glass. I want to tell you how a shipwright thinks. It matters here. You don't build a hull by guessing where the strain lands. You run your fingers down the grain of a plank before you cut it. You feel, right under your skin, exactly where it's going to split once real weight lands on it. I've done that 10,000 times. Oak, cedar, fir, 4 decades of it. Somewhere in there, I stopped being able to turn it off. I do it with people now too. I'd been running my fingers down the grain of my son-in-law for 9 years. I already knew, long before that dinner, exactly where he was going to split. Alma used to tease me about it, my wife. She'd catch me studying somebody at a church supper, quiet, not saying a word. She'd nudge me under the table. You're reading them again, aren't you? I always was. I read Cole Paget the first night Renee brought him home, 12 years back. Good-looking, easy-talking. He complimented my workbench. Never once asked what any of the tools on it actually did. A man who admires the shine and never asks what holds it together, that's a man you watch. I didn't say any of that to Renee. You don't tell your daughter the man she loves has a soft spot where his spine should be. You wait, you watch, and you build things quietly in the background. So when the soft spot finally gives, the people you love don't go down with it. That Tuesday dinner in March came 2 years after I'd already done the thing that mattered most. Nobody at that table knew it yet. 2 years after I signed papers in a lawyer's office in Portland. Papers Cole Paget assumed didn't exist. He thought the boatyard was still sitting there, in my name, waiting to fall into Renee's lap. Then, by the natural gravity of marriage, into his. He'd already started talking about it to his business partner like it was money in a drawer he just hadn't opened yet. He didn't know I'd sold that land 2 years before his toast. Didn't know where the money went. Didn't know his toast was for something that had already stopped belonging to anyone he could reach. I want to take you back further than that dinner. Back to when Alma was still at the kitchen table with me, going over the boatyard's books by hand, the way she'd done every month for 30 years. Reading glasses low on her nose, coffee going cold at her elbow. She taught school for 3 of those decades and kept books for all of them. She never let a number slide past her that didn't add up. She caught things I missed. She caught people too. In the last clear week before the cancer took the rest of her, she said something I've never repeated, not until the week of that dinner. She put her hand flat on the real ledger, the one with our whole life in it. Don't leave the ground to whoever claps loudest for you, Owen, she said. Leave it to whoever will still be standing on it in 30 years. I didn't understand all of it that day. I understood it fully about 4 years later, watching Cole Paget clap the loudest for anything that might one day be mine. Alma died on a Thursday in October, 6 years before that dinner. I buried her on a Sunday. The whole town came. A woman who taught 2 generations of Cutters Notch kids their multiplication tables and their manners doesn't go into the ground quietly. Cole came to the funeral in a suit that cost more than my truck. He put his hand on my shoulder at the graveside. Whatever you need, Owen. We're family now. I thought, at the time, it was a kind thing to say. I didn't yet know how a man like Cole defines the word family. To him, it meant a rope he could pull on. To me, it always meant a beam you don't put weight on unless you trust it's cured all the way through. I sold my business, Garrity Boat Works, the working part of it, when I was 68. 5 years before that dinner. The contracts, the crew, the goodwill, all of it. I kept the building and the land under it. That ground had Alma's handprints in the concrete, literally. She pressed her palm into a wet slab the day we poured the second shed's foundation, back in 1989. I wasn't letting anybody sell that out from under me while I was still breathing. For a while, keeping the building was enough. I still went down most mornings, unlocked the big doors, let the smell of cedar shavings and epoxy fill my lungs, even with nobody working there. I still ran my fingers down the grain of the old workbench, the one Alma used to sit at with her ledger. It kept me anchored. Then, about 2 years before that Tuesday dinner, I started noticing things. Small things. Cole asking Renee at a family barbecue whether Dad still got that shop building. His tone made it sound like a question about inventory, not about her father. Cole mentioning, unprompted, that property values on Widows Point Road had gone through the roof since the marina redevelopment 2 towns over. Cole telling my grandson Sam, 7 at the time, that someday that whole yard's going to be yours, buddy. A wink that made my chest go cold. That's not a promise a father makes about his own inheritance. That's a promise a man makes about somebody else's money he's already spending in his head. I didn't say anything. I went and read the grain instead. I drove to Portland on a Thursday. Told Renee I had a doctor's appointment, which wasn't exactly a lie. I did stop at the doctor's on the way back. I sat down across from Marjorie Teal, the attorney I'd retained 9 years earlier, the year Alma was first diagnosed. I told her what I'd been noticing. Marjorie's a small, sharp woman, keeps every file she's ever opened in a locked cabinet at her office on Exchange Street. She listened 20 minutes without writing a word down because she already had most of it written down from years before. You want to protect the land, she said, from someone with no legal claim to it yet, someone who clearly believes he will. I want to protect my grandson, I said, from a man who's already spending money he doesn't have. We didn't do anything dramatic, nothing that would have shown up as a raised voice in any room. I sold the boatyard building and the land under it, all 4 acres, for $630,000, to a marine restoration outfit out of Camden that wanted the deep water access more than the building itself. After closing costs and Marjorie's fees, $590,000 went into an irrevocable trust, the Alma Garrity Family Trust. My grandson Sam, sole beneficiary once he turns 25. Me, trustee until then. Cole Paget's name doesn't appear anywhere in that document. Neither does Renee's. Not because I don't love my daughter. A trust built to protect a boy has to be strong enough that even the boy's own father can't talk it out of its foundation. I told Renee the yard had sold, told her the truth, that upkeep got to be too much for an old man alone, that I wanted the money somewhere safe. She hugged me, said she was glad I was taking care of myself. She didn't ask where the money went. I've thought about that a lot since. My daughter didn't ask because some part of her already assumed she knew. The same way Cole assumed he knew. Neither one of them ever thought to check. I never told Cole a single word about the sale. He found out 9 months later from a delivery driver who mentioned it at the gas station. Renee told me, laughing a little, confused, that Cole had gotten strange and quiet about it for a few days. I let that sit. I didn't explain myself. A man doesn't owe an explanation to somebody who was never entitled to the thing in the first place. That's who was sitting at my table that Tuesday night. 2 years later, raising a glass to the old man's money. Money he thought was still parked in a building he no longer owned. That's the toast I let him finish. I want to be honest about something else. I wasn't sitting there plotting revenge. I was 73 years old. Tired. The particular way a man gets tired after burying his wife. Tired of watching his daughter marry into a family that never asked what any of my tools were for. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking, the way I always had, for the place where the grain was going to split. I just happened to already know where it was. Sam sat next to me, pushing peas around his plate. When Cole finished his toast, when the table went quiet a beat before Renee laughed, Sam looked up. Not at his father. At me, like he already understood, at 9 years old, that something in that room didn't add up, even if he couldn't have told you what. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder once. I didn't say anything. There'd be time to say something later. when the words would land somewhere other than on top of a toast nobody but Cole was proud of. That night, after Renee and Cole and Sam went home, I sat alone in my kitchen, the same table where Alma once put her hand flat on the ledger and told me who to leave the ground to. I got up, went to the back room, pulled a folder from the drawer where I keep the things that matter. Inside, a copy of the recorded deed, the county stamp. The date, 2 years old already. Inside too, something I hadn't looked at in longer than I should admit. A sealed white envelope. Alma's handwriting on the front. 3 words only. For our Sam. I hadn't opened it. Told myself for 2 years I was saving it. That there'd be a right moment. Sitting there that night, a glass of water going warm in front of me, I understood the right moment was getting close. Closer than I wanted, because the next move wasn't going to be mine alone anymore. It was going to need Renee in the room when it happened. It was going to need her to actually read something. Not just laugh along with a toast, because that was easier than asking questions. I put the folder back that night. Didn't call Marjorie. Not yet. I wanted to watch a little longer first. The way you watch a plank after you've spotted the hairline. Just to see how fast the crack is moving before you decide whether to cut around it or let it run. It didn't take long to see. 3 weeks after that dinner, Renee called on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice doing that bright, careful thing it does. The thing it does when she's about to ask for something she already knows I might not like. Dad, Cole's been talking about expanding the business. A second store in Rockland. He thinks it could really take off. Is that so? I said. I was in the shop when she called, running a rag over the old workbench out of habit more than need. He was wondering, she said, and here it came. If maybe, once the yard building's settled, you think about helping him get it off the ground. Not a gift. A loan. He'd pay you back. I stood there with the rag in my hand a long moment. The yard building's been settled for 2 years, Renee, I said. I sold it. You know that. I know, I just meant the money from it, she said. A little stumble in her voice, like she was reading off a script somebody else had handed her. Cole thought maybe some of that was still, around. Some of it's around, I said. It's around doing exactly what I put it there to do. She didn't push. Renee's never been a pusher, not on her own. She's a woman who goes quiet when she doesn't like an answer. Let somebody else decide what happens next. That's always been both the softest and the most dangerous thing about my daughter. Soft, because she'd rather absorb an unfairness than cause a scene. Dangerous, because a man like Cole learned long ago how it works. Push hard enough on Renee, and eventually he doesn't have to push on me at all. I called Marjorie the next morning. I think it's time we make sure everything's buttoned up, I told her. Say it plain, Marjorie. Is there any way for Cole Paget to get his hands on the trust? Or the sale proceeds? Before Sam turns 25? None, she said. No pause, no checking a file. You structured it irrevocable, specifically so no one, including you, could redirect it under pressure. I remember exactly why you wanted it that way, Owen. You said you didn't trust yourself. Said you might not say no to your daughter's face if it came down to that. She was right. I hadn't trusted myself. I'd trusted the paper instead. Paper doesn't love anybody. That's exactly what makes it reliable. There's something else, I told her. I think Cole's in real trouble. Not just wanting more, needing it. What makes you say that? I told her about the Rockland idea, about the careful, rehearsed way Renee had phrased it, like Cole had walked her through exactly what to say. I told her about a comment Cole made at the dinner, almost in passing, that his partner, a man named Ferris, had been getting nervous lately. Marjorie made a small sound on the line, the sound of a woman writing something down. I'll make a few calls, she said, quietly. That's the other thing about a woman like Marjorie Teal. She doesn't do anything loud either. We understood each other from the first meeting. 9 years back, the worst month of my life. Alma's diagnosis had just come in, and I sat in Marjorie's office, not knowing if I needed a lawyer or a priest. Marjorie looked at me and said, "Let's get your affairs so clean that grief's the only thing you'll have to deal with when the time comes." She meant it. She did it. Now she was doing it again, quietly, for the next generation. It was Denny Furlong who told me the real number, about a month after that call to Marjorie. Denny's the harbour master in Cutter's Notch. Has been as long as I can remember. Before that, he crewed on 2 of the very first boats I built, back in the 70s. Denny and I have had breakfast at the same diner on Front Street every other Wednesday for almost 20 years. Not much moves through this harbour town that Denny doesn't hear eventually. Your son-in-law's outfit, Denny said, over eggs stirring his coffee slow. The marine supply place. Word around the docks is his supplier out of Bangor's been calling. A lot. How much are we talking? I said. Heard it's close to 50 grand, Denny said. Give or take. Inventory he already took delivery of and hasn't paid off. For that new location. I didn't say anything for a minute. Just sat with my own coffee, watching the boats rock gentle against the dock. Boats I'd built parts of. Decades of them. Still out there doing exactly what they were built to do. He tell Renee that number? I asked. Denny shook his head. From what I hear, no. From what I hear, your son-in-law's real good at telling people the shiny half of a story. I thought about the day Renee brought Cole home, 12 years back. How he'd run his hand along my workbench, called it a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. Never once asked what it was for. A man who admires the shine and skips the function. I'd read that grain the very first night. It just took this long for the crack to reach the surface where everybody else could see it too. I called Marjorie again that same afternoon. Denny says it's close to 50,000, I told her. A supplier out of Bangor. Inventory debt, not a bank loan. That's worse for him, not better. Suppliers don't wait as long as banks do before they start making noise. I found something similar, Marjorie said. I had a colleague in Rockland pull the public filings on the lease Cole signed for the second location. He put down a security deposit of $19,000. There's a UCC filing too, a lien from a supplier claiming a security interest in his existing inventory. That's not a company expanding, Owen. That's a company trying to stay upright. He toasted my money at my own table, I said, like it already belonged to him. Then let's make sure he understands, Marjorie said. Clearly. On paper, exactly how far it doesn't. But I want to say something plainly the way I always do. This isn't about punishing your son-in-law for being desperate. Desperate men do desperate things, and desperation alone isn't a crime. What matters is whether he's tried to touch what isn't his, or tried to convince your daughter to sign something she shouldn't. That's the line we watch. I told her I understood. I did, because whatever Cole Paget was, whatever he'd let himself become chasing a second store in Rockland, Renee was still my daughter. Sam was still my grandson. Neither one of them had asked to be caught between a man's shine and a man's function. But I kept watching. A hairline crack that's already reached the surface doesn't stay small for long. It spreads toward whatever's nearest. I intended to know exactly which direction it was spreading before it reached my daughter. It took 3 weeks to see which way the crack was spreading. Cole didn't come at me directly. Men like Cole never do. He comes through the side door. Through Renee, through a comment dropped at a barbecue like it's nothing. I heard about the first one from my neighbour, Faye Whitcomb. She runs the flower shop on Front Street, hears everything twice before I do. Owen, she said, catching me at the hardware store, somebody mentioned you'd had a spell last month. A dizzy spell. At the shop. I hadn't had a spell. Told her so. That's what I figured, she said. But Cole told the Ferris boy's mother you'd wandered off during a fishing trip, that Renee had to come find you. But I never wandered anywhere. I went to check a mooring line on Denny's boat, told Cole exactly where I was going. Came back 20 minutes later with a fish. Cole turned 20 minutes into a story about an old man lost on the docks. I understood, standing in that aisle with a box of wood screws in my hand, exactly what kind of campaign I was in. Not a fight. A rumour, small stones dropped one at a time, until the pile looks like a wall. I didn't correct Faye. Correcting a rumour just feeds it a second meal. I thanked her for the warning. Went home, wrote the date in a notebook I keep in my shop desk. Same drawer as the deed. Same drawer as Alma's envelope. March the 14th. First stone. 2 weeks later, second stone. Renee called on a Sunday. Doing that careful voice again. Dad, Cole thinks maybe you should see Dr. Ansell. Just a check-up. You've seemed tired. I hadn't seemed tired. I'd sanded a bookshelf 6 hours the day before. That'll make anybody look tired. I know, he worries, Renee said. We all worry. Who's we? I said. Quiet. Not sharp. Just a question. Laid flat on the table. She didn't answer that one straight. Something about family, about wanting the best for me. Nobody accuses an innocent man of anything out loud. Not yet. They build a file first. I know what a file looks like. I built one for 40 years, every job, every invoice, every plank that split under bad lumber. Cole was building a file on me. Forgetful, tired, needs looking after. A file like that, thick enough, walks into a courtroom, asks a judge for the keys to another man's life. I called Marjorie that same night. First time in 9 years, I heard something sharpen in her voice. Write down every incident, she said. Date, time, who said what, who they said it to. Not because I think you're paranoid, because you're about to become the subject of a competency narrative. The only defense against a narrative is a record. Already started, I told her. Good. And if anyone suggests a doctor's visit, you go. Gladly. Smiling. Make sure it's a physician of your own choosing. I called Dr. Ansell's office the next morning, before Cole or Renee could arrange anything. Asked for a full cognitive workup. Told the receptionist plainly why. Dr. Ansell had been my doctor 11 years. Small and precise. She ran memory test, recall test, the whole battery. Insulting, honestly, for a man who could still quote the talk spec on a 1971 outboard from memory. I passed everyone. She wrote a letter unprompted, called my cognition entirely intact, above average for my age bracket. Marjorie filed a copy where it mattered. 2 stones down. Cole didn't know he was playing against a man already 3 moves ahead. 3rd stone came at Sam's Little League game. April. Sun bright over the diamond. Cole sat 2 rows down, talking with a man named Griggs, ran the auto parts store. Sound carries on aluminum bleachers. I've got good ears and nothing better to do than watch my grandson chase a fly ball. My father-in-law's getting up there, Cole was saying. We're thinking about protections, power of attorney, just to be safe. Griggs said something I didn't catch. He'd never agree himself, Cole said, laughing a little. Too proud, these old guys. Will probably go through the courts. Guardianship, for his own good. I sat with my hands folded, watching Sam round second. Felt something in my chest that wasn't rage. Colder than rage. Rage burns hot and burns out fast. This was the kind that settles into a joint before winter and stays. Cole wasn't talking about protecting me. He was talking in public, at a 9-year-old's ball game, about a courtroom taking my life away. Handing him the keys, Sam scored. The bleachers cheered. I cheered too. A boy shouldn't know his grandfather heard that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night I sat at my kitchen table and wrote it all down. Word for word. Guardianship. Power of attorney. For his own good. Dated it. Called Marjorie first thing Monday. He said it out loud, I told her. At a Little League game. In front of Griggs from the auto parts store. Would Mr. Griggs say what he heard? If it came to that. I didn't know. Told her I'd find out. Careful. The way you test a plank before you trust it. Went to Griggs's shop the next week. Bought wiper blades I didn't need. Talked about the game, about Sam's swing. Worked my way around to asking if he remembered his talk with Cole in the stands. Griggs is a plain, decent man. 60 years old. Been running that shop since before Cole came to town. He looked at me a long moment. He talks about you like you're already gone, Owen, Griggs said. Like a house he's already sold in his head. Didn't like it much. Wasn't my business to say so. But I didn't like it. Would you remember it? If somebody asked you someday? I'd remember it, Griggs said. Man talks about his wife's father that way, at a kid's ball game. That's not something I forget. I thanked him, paid for the wipers, drove home with something in my chest that felt, for the first time in weeks, almost like relief. Not because I wanted a war, because I finally understood the shape of the one Cole had already started, and now I had a witness, one who'd stand in the open, if it came to that. I didn't tell Renee any of it, not to protect her from an ugly truth, because I still believed, right up until the week everything broke open, that my daughter could be reached. That somewhere under the careful voice Cole fed her, there was still the girl who used to sit on my workbench, swinging her feet, naming every tool like a spell. I wasn't ready to give up on that girl. I don't think a father ever is. Alma wouldn't have given up either. She used to say Renee had a soft heart. A soft heart isn't a flaw. It's a gift as long as somebody stands guard around it. I'd stood guard around my daughter's soft heart for 31 years. I wasn't stopping because her husband found a way to use it against her. So I kept watching, kept the notebook, kept the file. And I kept doing the one thing that scared Cole worse than anything. Though he wouldn't understand that for months, I kept being calm A worried man raises his voice. A guilty man gets defensive. A confused man contradicts himself. I did none of it. Ever. In front of Cole. I think that unsettled him more than any fight could. He wanted an argument. An argument would prove his story. An old man losing his temper. Exactly the kind of thing you cite in a courtroom filing. I never gave him 1 second of it. Instead, I gave him quiet questions. Pleasant ones. At the next family dinner, first week of May, I asked how the Rockland expansion was coming. Same tone you'd use asking about the weather. Cole's face did something small and fast. There and gone. Before the easy smile slid back. Really well, he said. We're excited. Good financing, I asked. Still pleasant. Still just an old man making conversation. Banks are tight these days, I hear. We've got it handled, Cole said. Glad to hear it, I said. Pass the potatoes, let the talk move on. The way water moves around a rock it can't push through. Renee glanced at me once, quick, like she wasn't sure what she'd just watched. I gave her nothing to be sure of. That's the thing about reading grain. You don't announce what you found, you note the weak spot. You wait for the day the weight finally lands on it. I didn't wait long. 2 days after that dinner, Denny Furlong called at 7 in the morning. His voice had none of its usual harbour drawl in it. Owen, he said, you got a minute? Something you need to hear. Sit down first. I sat down. Denny doesn't call at 7 for small talk. He doesn't tell a man to sit unless the news wants a chair under him. Ferris cut Cole loose, Denny said. His business partner. Word around the docks is Ferris pulled his half of the capital out Friday. Told 2 of the crew he wasn't going down with a boat he didn't captain. I felt that land the way you feel. A beam shift before it drops. How bad, I said. Bad enough Cole's the only name left on the Rockland lease now. No partner behind him. No buffer. Just him and whatever he can scrape. I thanked Denny. Hung up the phone. Sat at my own kitchen table a long minute. Looking at the chair Alma used to sit in. Thinking about a man standing alone under a beam. He'd convinced himself somebody else was holding up. I called Marjorie within the hour. Told her about Ferris. She went quiet a second. The way she does when she's already 3 steps ahead of what I've told her. That changes the timeline, she said. A man with a partner has time. A man without one runs out of it fast. Owen, I think we should stop watching and start preparing the second dinner. What second dinner? I said. The one where I'm sitting at your table, Marjorie said. Because I think you're going to need a witness soon. One who isn't family. One who isn't scared of anybody in that room. I looked at the folder in the desk drawer. The deed. The trust summary. Alma's sealed envelope, still unopened after 2 years. 3 words on the front, in her handwriting. For our Sam. All right, I said. Set the date. Marjorie didn't set the date right away. Told me to wait 2 weeks. Let her make a few more quiet calls first, the kind she makes without her name attached. I understood. You don't cut a plank until you know where the grain runs. In those 2 weeks, I did something I've been putting off longer than I want to admit. I opened Alma's envelope. I told myself for 2 years I was saving it, waiting for the right moment. Sitting in my shop on a Tuesday night, the overhead light humming the way it's hummed since 1991, I finally admitted it. There wasn't going to be a right moment. There was only ever going to be a moment I stopped being afraid of what her handwriting would do to me. I slit the envelope with the pocket knife I've carried 40 years. Inside was a single folded sheet, and a smaller sealed note underneath marked, for Sam, when he's older. I read the first sheet first. Her handwriting, small and careful. The same hand that kept 30 years of boatyard ledgers without a number out of place. Oh, and if you're reading this, it's because you finally stopped being stubborn about it. Or because something happened that made you need to. Either way, I want you to know I saw Cole for exactly what he is the first year Renee brought him around. I never said it plainly, didn't want to put you in the position of choosing between your daughter's happiness and my opinion of the man she picked. But I want it said now, in my own hand, so there's no confusion later. He's not a bad man. He's a frightened one wearing a good suit. Frightened men reach for whatever's nearest when the floor starts moving. Don't let what's nearest be our grandson's future. I told you once, at this same kitchen table, not to leave the ground to whoever claps loudest. I meant it about the yard. I mean it twice as hard about Sam. Whatever you build to protect him, build it strong. Strong enough that even you, on your softest day, missing me the most, can't be talked out of it. Not by anyone's tears. Not even your own. I love you. I loved building all of it with you. Go finish the job. Alma, I sat in that shop a long time after I read it. Longer than I'll say. The old workbench in front of me. The one she used to sit at with her ledger, coffee going cold at her elbow. 30 years of her handwriting, living in the grain of that wood the same as my own tools. I ran my fingers along the edge of it, out of habit, not feeling for anything in particular, just needing to touch something she'd touched. I didn't open the note for Sam. That one wasn't mine to open. Put it back in the folder, next to the deed, next to the trust summary. For the first time since she'd died, I understood exactly what I was supposed to do with the years I had left. Not survive them. Finish the job. 3 days later, the second secret surfaced. It didn't come from Denny or Griggs. It came from my own bank. I'd gone in on a Thursday morning to move some funds. Routine business. The kind of thing I've done 1,000 times at the same branch on Anchor Street, where I've banked for 40 years. The teller, a young woman named Priya, who'd helped me a dozen times before, pulled up my account. Got a small crease between her eyebrows. "Mr. Garrity," she said, "I want to flag something for you, if that's all right. There was an inquiry on your credit file last month. A hard pull." "I haven't applied for anything," I said. "That's what I thought," she said. "It's tied to a loan application. Small business line of credit. Your name's listed as a co-signer." The cold settled deeper than it had at the ball game. "Whose loan?" I said. She turned her screen a few degrees. "Careful. The way people are when they know they're handing you something that's going to hurt. Paget Marine Outfitters. Applicant, Cole Paget. Co-signer, Owen Garrity. $9,000. I had never signed a single piece of paper for that loan. Not one line. "I need a copy of that application." I told her. "Today, if you can manage it." She could. And she did. I sat in my truck in the bank parking lot with the printed pages in my lap. Looked at a signature at the bottom of the co-signer line that was supposed to be mine and wasn't. Close. Close enough to fool a loan officer moving fast on a Tuesday afternoon. Not close enough to fool a man who signed his own name onto contracts, permits and closing documents for 50 straight years. The G leaned wrong. The tail on the Y curled the wrong direction. I know my own hand the way I know the grain of oak. I called Marjorie from the parking lot before I'd even started the truck. "He forged my signature," I said. "On a loan application. $9,000. Long pause on her end. The kind that means a lawyer's doing careful math about how serious this just became. "Owen," she said finally, "I need you to understand what you just told me. That's not a family dispute anymore. That's a crime. Forgery. Depending how the bank pursues it, potentially fraud against a federally insured institution. I don't want him in handcuffs," I said. And I meant it. Whatever Cole was, Renee still loved him. Sam still called him Dad. I hadn't spent a lifetime reading Grain just to watch a boy lose his father. Not over $9,000. I want it stopped. Documented. I want it to be a card I hold, not a bomb I drop. "Then we hold it," Marjorie said. "We get a certified copy of the fraudulent document from the bank. An affidavit from the loan officer confirming the signature discrepancy. And we sit on it. Quietly. Until it does the most good with the least damage to your daughter and your grandson. That's a decision only you make, Owen. Sit with it before you decide anything." I sat with it exactly one night. Alma's letter, still warm in my mind from 3 days before, kept circling back to one line. "He is a frightened man wearing a good suit. Frightened men forge signatures when they think nobody's checking." I'd underestimated how frightened Cole had gotten. That scared me more than any Bleacher rumour ever could. A man desperate enough to forge my name might do something worse before this was over. Something that could touch Renee. Or Sam. Or the trust itself. I called Marjorie back the next morning. "Get the certified copy," I said. "Get the affidavit. And let's set the date for that second dinner. I'm done watching the crack spread. I want to see how far it's already travelled." She got the documents within the week, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move. What she found waiting under the loan application floored even a man who thought he'd already seen the whole shape of it. The $9,000 loan wasn't Cole's only forged signature. A second one, 6 weeks older, on a personal guarantee for a supplier credit line. $22,000. This one didn't carry my name. It carried Renee's. Marjorie asked her attorney friend to make one quiet inquiry. Renee swore up and down she'd never signed any such thing. My daughter had been forged too. Cole hadn't just been lying to me. He'd been using his own wife's name, without her knowledge, to keep his failing business breathing. Either she genuinely didn't know, which meant she was as much a victim as anyone at that table, or she was further into this than any of us wanted to believe. I chose to believe the first. Alma had asked me to leave a door open for our daughter. I intended to keep it open as long as the facts allowed it. There's more, Marjorie told me, 3 days before the dinner she'd finally scheduled. The supplier, the one out of Bangor Denny mentioned, they filed a lien against Paget Marine's remaining inventory. Public record now. Filed at the county level, 11 days ago. And I pulled the Rockland lease. Cole put down a security deposit of $19,000 on that second location. If the lease defaults, he forfeits every dollar. I did the arithmetic slow, the way I do everything. $48,000 owed to the supplier. $9,000 forged against my name, $22,000 forged against Renee's. A $19,000 deposit about to evaporate. A partner who'd already run. A man standing entirely alone under a beam he'd convinced an entire family was still somebody else's to hold. Set the dinner for Sunday, I told Marjorie. I want you there, I want the folder there. I want my daughter to finally see the whole shape of what she's been protecting. Are you ready for what happens if she doesn't take it well? Marjorie asked. Owen, I have to ask. Sometimes people don't thank you for the truth. Sometimes they blame the messenger. I thought about Renee at 9 years old, sitting on my workbench, swinging her feet, naming every tool in the shop like a spell she was casting to keep her father close. I thought about Alma's letter, still sitting in the folder. Whatever you build to protect him, build it strong. I've been ready for 2 years, I said. I just didn't want to be right. Before that Sunday came, I made one more trip to Portland. Marjorie wanted everything gathered in one place. Physically, in my hands. Before we sat down with Cole across from us, she said a folder full of promises isn't the same as a folder full of certified copies. She's been right about most things for 9 years running. I drove down on a Wednesday, parked near Exchange Street, walked into a bank on Congress Street where I'd kept a safe deposit box since before Alma got sick. $45 a year, a box the size of a shoebox. Inside sat the things a man keeps when he stopped trusting any single roof to hold everything he cares about. The original recorded deed to the Garrity Boatworks land, county stamp visible, dated 2 years before Cole's toast. The trust documents, $590,000, Sam as sole beneficiary, me as trustee until he turns 25. A copy of Dr. Ansell's letter on my cognition, dated and notarized. And now, added that week, the certified forged loan application. My name butchered at the bottom of it. The affidavit from the loan officer confirming the signature didn't match my file. And a fresh document Marjorie had walked over to have prepared the same morning. A formal notice of revocation. Ending any informal understanding Cole might have believed existed about future access to family funds. Airtight. Dated. Witnessed. I laid it all out on the little metal table in the vault room, under fluorescent light. Looked at 4 decades of quiet decisions sitting there in black and white. Alma's handprint was in the concrete of that shop. It was in this folder too, in a different way. Everything in it existed because a school teacher with a ledger taught us shipwrite something, one number at a time. Love without documentation is just a hope. Hope doesn't hold weight the way paper does. I called Renee from the bank parking lot before I drove home, not to warn her, to hear her voice one more time before Sunday. Before whatever was coming landed on her the way it was going to land. Dad, she said, you sound different. I'm fine, I said. And I was. The way a man is fine on a dock watching a storm come in, he's already battened down for. I was hoping you and Cole and Sam could come to dinner Sunday. Marjorie's going to join us. There was a pause I could hear the shape of, even over the phone. Marjorie Teal, your lawyer. She's an old friend too, I said. True. Not the whole truth. Also true. Is everything okay? Renee asked. Under the careful voice Cole had trained into her, I heard something. Just for a second. The girl who used to swing her feet on my workbench. Everything's about to be, I told her. Sunday, 6 o'clock. She agreed. Quiet. A little unsettled. I hung up and sat in that parking lot a long minute, hands on the wheel, before I started the engine. Cole didn't wait for Sunday to make his next move. 2 days before the dinner, on a Friday afternoon, he showed up at my house alone, which he'd never once done in 12 years of marriage to my daughter. Always Renee first. Always Renee as the buffer. Always Renee softening whatever he'd come to say. This time it was just him, standing on my porch, suit that cost more than a month of my old crew's wages, smiling the same smile he'd been smiling at me since the funeral. "Owen," he said, "got a minute?" I let him in, poured 2 coffees, sat across from him at the same kitchen table, the one where Alma once put her hand flat on the ledger. Told me who to leave the ground to. "I wanted to talk to you man to man," Cole said, "before Sunday. I hear Marjorie's coming, and I want us on the same page. I know things have felt tense lately, and I don't want you to think this family's turning against you." "I don't think that," I said. True enough, I didn't think the whole family was against me. I thought one man in it was drowning and grabbing at whatever floated past. "There's been talk," Cole said, choosing his words carefully, the way a man chooses steps on ice, "about maybe getting you a little extra support. Someone to help manage things. Finances, appointments, that kind of thing. Nothing dramatic. Just a wellness consultation. A specialist Renee found. Dr. Halloran, up in Bangor. Real good reputation." "For my wellness," I said. "For everybody's peace of mind," Cole said, "including yours." I looked at him a long moment. 41 years old, still boyish in the face, still wearing the confidence of a man who'd never once had a plank split under him, mid-cut. Because he'd never actually built anything with his own hands to find out. I thought about the forged $9,000 sitting in a folder 45 minutes south of us. I thought about Renee's forged name on 22,000 more. I thought about Alma's letter. He is a frightened man wearing a good suit. "Cole," I said, "I appreciate the concern. Truly. But I saw Dr. Ansell myself back in March. Full cognitive workup. She said I was sharper than average for my age. I've got the paperwork if you'd like to see it." Something flickered across his face. There and gone. The same flicker I'd seen at the dinner table when I asked about his financing. That's great, Owen. Really. I just worry is all." "I know you do," I said. "Let that sit a moment without decorating it. A true thing doesn't need decoration. A false one doesn't deserve any. Cole, can I ask you something? Man to man, like you said." "Of course. How's the Rockland lease holding up?" The flicker again. "Longer this time. We're working through some logistics. Standard stuff." "Growing pains?" "Standard stuff," I repeated. Not sharp. Just laying the words flat, the way I lay everything. $19,000 of standard stuff. On the deposit alone. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down slow, careful not to let it clatter against the saucer. Looked at me with something new in his eyes. Not quite fear yet, close enough to smell it coming. "How do you know that number?" he said. "I read the grain," I said. "That's all I've ever done, Cole. 43 years of it. I don't raise my voice. I just notice where things are about to split." He didn't have an answer for that. Sat there a moment, coffee going cold in front of him, same as it always did in front of Alma. Then he stood, thanked me for the coffee in a voice that had lost most of its polish, left without another word about wellness consultations or Dr. Halloran in Bangor. I sat at that table alone a long while after the door caused shut. Not triumphant. I want to be honest about that. If I let you believe I felt triumphant, I'd be lying about the only thing in this whole story worth telling straight. I felt tired. The particular tiredness of a man who spent 2 years building a floor. Under people. People busy building a trapdoor under him. And finally seeing the trapdoor for what it was. I called Marjorie that evening. He came by, I told her. Fishing. Tried the wellness angle straight to my face. "How'd you handle it?" Told him I'd already had the workup. Then asked him about the Rockland deposit. There was a pause. Then something I rarely heard from Marjorie in 9 years. A small laugh, dry as sawdust. "Owen, I hope you understand what you just did. You let him know you're not just watching. You let him know you're already ahead of him. That's either the smartest thing you could have done, or it's about to make Sunday a great deal more volatile. I've never once won a fight by letting the other man think he still had one coming," I said. I wanted him to spend the weekend knowing exactly how much rope was left. And how much is left. I thought about the folder in the safe deposit box, the deed, the trust, Alma's letter, the forged loan, the lien, the lease about to default. Renee's own name, stolen and spent without her knowing. None, I said. There's no rope left at all. There's just Sunday. Sam called me that same night, which he almost never did on his own. Using Renee's phone, his voice small on the line, the way it gets when something's bothering him, he doesn't have the words for yet. "Grandpa," he said, "is everything okay?" Dad seemed weird at dinner. "Everything's going to be okay," I told him. Meant it the way you mean a promise you've already built the foundation for. Poured and cured and load tested. Not the kind you make hoping the ground holds. You know how I always tell you to check the grain before you cut? Yeah. I've been checking it a long time, buddy. I know exactly where this one's going to split. It's not going to fall on you. I promise you that. He was quiet a second. "Okay, Grandpa," he said, the voice of a boy who mostly believed his grandfather. Because his grandfather had never once given him a reason not to. "Get some sleep," I told him. "Sunday's going to be a good day." "I promise you that too." I hung up the phone, sat in my kitchen a long time, looking at Alma's chair, empty 6 years now, and still somehow the fullest thing in the room. 2 more days, I thought. 2 more days. And then everyone at that table finds out exactly whose money they've been toasting. I want to take a moment here before I tell you about that Sunday. Tell you something about the years before it. A story like this only means something if you understand the whole shape of the life it interrupted. Not just the 2 years it took to unravel. I met Alma Doucette in 1974, at a church supper 2 towns over. I want to be honest, I didn't notice her right away. I noticed her ledger first. She was helping the deacon's wife balance the church's accounts, sitting at a folding table, pencil behind her ear. She caught an error in the collection count that 3 other people had already checked and missed. I watched her find it, watched her explain it plain and patient, no pride in her voice. I thought, there's a woman who sees things clearly. I was 21, already building my first boat hull in my father's shed. Asked her to a movie the following Friday. She said yes, that was that. 49 years, most of a lifetime, decided over a folding table and a collection plate that didn't add up. We married in 1976. I built the house on Widows Point Road with my own hands over the next 3 years. Nights and weekends, around jobs I was taking to keep us fed. Alma kept the books for both, the house fund and the boatyard fund, in the same ledger side by side. She said a marriage's money only makes sense if you can see the whole picture on one page. She pressed her palm into the wet concrete of the second shed's foundation in 1989. The year Renee turned 9, told me laughing she wanted proof she'd been there, in case anybody ever doubted whose sweat that shop was built from. Renee grew up in that shop as much as she grew up in the house. She'd sit on the workbench for hours after school, ask me to name every tool, memorize them the way other kids memorize baseball cards. Chisel, spoke shave, draw knife, caulking iron. She could name 40 tools by the time she was 7. I used to think, watching her, she'd grow up to build things too. With her hands, the way her mother and I both had, she grew up instead soft-hearted and careful, afraid of conflict in a way neither Alma nor I had ever quite been. I don't say that as a criticism. Some children take after the grain of their parents. Some grow their own entirely, shaped by things you never fully understand, even after 30 years of watching them close. Renee wanted peace more than she wanted to be right. For most of her childhood, that was a gift, not a flaw. A house with a soft-hearted daughter in it is a warmer house than one without. The trouble started, I think now, looking back, not with Cole at all, with Alma's diagnosis, the year Renee turned 28, 5 years before that first toast. Ovarian cancer, caught late, the kind of late doctors talk around instead of straight through. Alma fought it 18 months, harder than I've ever seen anyone fight anything. I watched my daughter, in those 18 months, learn a different kind of soft-heartedness, the kind that says yes to everyone and everything. Because saying no feels, in the middle of that much grief, like one more loss the family can't afford. Cole came into the picture during those 18 months, introduced by a mutual friend at the hospital's cancer support group, of all places. His own mother had gone through a similar fight 2 years earlier. I remember thinking, when Renee first brought him home, that a man who'd watched his own mother suffer that disease would understand what my daughter was carrying. I was wrong about that, or at least wrong about how deep the understanding actually ran. I didn't know it yet. Grief makes fools of even careful men. I told you already about the first night, the workbench, the compliment on craftsmanship. No question about function underneath it. One more piece I left out. That same night at dinner, Cole asked Alma something. Gentle, careful, sympathetic. Seemed kind at the time. How much the treatments were costing us. How the insurance was handling it. What kind of financial strain a diagnosis like that puts on a family. I remember Alma answering him plainly. She always answered questions plainly. Even then, some small part of me noted how quickly he'd gotten to the subject of money. On a night when nobody else at that table had mentioned it at all. Alma noticed too. Told me later that night doing the dishes, drying a plate slow in her hands the way she did when she was working through a thought. That boy asks about money the way some men ask about the weather, she said. Like it's just conversation. I don't think it's just conversation for him, Owen. I told her she was being unfair, that grief makes everyone a little strange, that plenty of good men ask awkward questions when they don't know what else to say to a dying woman's family. She let it go, too sick, too tired, too deep into her own fight to spend her remaining energy on a young man she'd only met once. But she never fully let it go either. Not really. I understand now, reading her letter 2 years after her death, that she'd been carrying that first night impression the whole time. Quiet, patient, filing it away the same way I file away a hairline crack in a plank I'm not ready to cut around yet. She died on a Thursday in October, surrounded by the whole family, Renee holding one hand, me holding the other, Cole standing respectfully at the back of the room, the way a good son-in-law should. I want to be fair to him here because fairness matters even now, even after everything. He grieved genuinely, cried at the funeral, gave a short, kind eulogy about the woman who'd welcomed him into a family he badly wanted to belong to. Whatever else Cole Paget became over the following 6 years, I don't believe his grief that day was false. But grief and greed can live in the same man without cancelling each other out. I learned that slow, the hard way, watching a decent enough eulogy give way, over the following seasons, to comments about property values, to winks at a 7-year-old about inheritances, to a campaign of small stones dropped one at a time until the pile looked like a wall. Alma's instinct, formed over one dinner 5 years before her death, turned out to be exactly right. The same instinct that caught a bad number at a collection plate. The very first night I ever laid eyes on her, I've thought a great deal, these 2 years, about whether I did right by Renee, keeping so much from her for so long. I've decided, and I still believe it. A father protects his child, however the moment actually requires, even when that way looks from the outside, like secrecy instead of love. Alma protected Renee too, in her own way, with a letter she wrote and sealed and never spoke of again, trusting the right moment would eventually arrive on its own, without her needing to be there to manage it. The right moment arrived on a Sunday in June, at my own kitchen table, 49 years after a folding table and a collection plate that didn't add up, 6 years after I buried the only woman who ever read me as clearly as I read grain, 2 years after I quietly finished the last piece of work she ever asked of me. I want you to understand before I tell you what happened at that table that none of it felt like victory to me. It felt like the last plank of a boat I'd been building slowly, carefully, for longer than I'd let myself admit. Finally getting set into place, where it belonged. The Saturday before that Sunday dinner, Cole made one more move. It told me exactly how far under the water he'd actually gone. Renee called me at 8 in the morning, her voice tight, a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager, caught in some small lie she hadn't learned to tell smoothly yet. "Dad, can you come by the house? Cole wants to talk to you." Alone this time. He said it's important. I drove over. Their house sits on a cul-de-sac, 2 towns over, a place Cole bought 6 years ago. Financing I'd quietly co-signed, back before I understood what kind of man I was co-signing for. A debt he later paid off. One of the only debts of his I know for certain he paid off on his own. I parked behind his truck, newer than mine, shinier than mine, worth about a third of what mine had actually earned, hauling lumber and outboard motors up and down the coast. Cole met me at the door, alone. Renee and Sam nowhere in sight, led me into his home office, a small room off the kitchen, desk too clean for a man who claimed his business was in crisis. "Owen," he said, I want to lay something out for you. Man to man. No lawyers, no folders. Just us. I'm listening, I said. Sat in the chair across from his desk, hands folded, the way I sit in every room I need to read carefully. I know things look bad, Cole said. The loan, the guarantee, I know how that reads. But I want you to understand, I was never trying to steal from you. I was trying to save something. The store, the family's stability, all of it. If Rockland succeeds, none of this matters. The debt gets paid quietly, and everybody moves forward like it never happened. And if Rockland doesn't succeed, I said. He didn't answer that directly. Instead, he slid a single page across the desk. I recognized the weight of it before I even picked it up. The particular weight of a document drafted by somebody hoping you won't read it too closely. A promissory note. $48,000, payable by me to cover the supplier debt directly. Structured as a personal loan from father-in-law to son-in-law. 6% interest, 5-year term. At the bottom, a line for my signature. Beside it, already filled in, a line for a witness. Renee's name, already signed. She already signed as witness, I said. Quiet. Turned the page toward the window light so I could look at it properly. She wants to help, Cole said. We talked about it last night. She thinks if we can just get past this one hurdle, Cole, I said, and set the page back down. Flat. The way I set everything down. Did Renee actually read this document? Or did you tell her what it said and hand her a pen? The silence answered the question more completely than anything he could have said out loud. I want to help my daughter, I said. I've spent 31 years wanting to help my daughter. I tend to keep wanting that for however many years I've got left. But I'm not signing a note that hands you $48,000 more dollars. Not to pour into a hole that's already $48,000 deep. Secured against nothing. Structured so that if Rockland fails anyway, I'm the one left holding paper on a debt you never had the standing to take out in the first place. So you're just going to let it collapse, Cole said. An edge in his voice now, the first real edge I'd heard from him in 12 years. The sound of a man watching his last plan fail in real time. Let the business go under. Let the lease default. You'd rather watch that happen than help. I offered to help 2 years ago, I said. I told Renee the day I sold the yard that the money was going somewhere safe. I meant every word of that. It went to protect Sam, the one person in this whole situation who never asked for any part of what's happening to him. I never once said I wouldn't help you, Cole. I said I wouldn't hand you money without understanding where it was going and what it was securing. You've never once given me the chance to ask those questions honestly, because you've never once been honest with me about the size of the hole. You don't know the size of the hole, Cole snapped. There it was, the crack finally reaching daylight. 12 years of careful smiles, breaking through. I know it's at least $48,000 to the supplier, I said. Still flat, still quiet. A man raising his voice at me has never once made me want to raise mine back. I know it's $19,000 on a lease deposit you'll likely forfeit. I know Ferris pulled out and left you holding the whole thing alone. I know because I've spent 2 years watching the grain of this coal. The same way I've spent 43 years watching the grain of every piece of wood I ever put a saw to. You didn't build anything sturdy here. You built something that looks solid from the outside. Hollow the whole way through. Now you're asking me to co-sign the hollow part. He sat back. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something under the anger that looked almost like relief. The particular relief of a man finally seen clearly by somebody who isn't going to look away from it. What am I supposed to do? He said. Quieter now. Tomorrow, I said, you're going to sit down at my table. With Renee, with Sam, with Marjorie there as counsel. And you're going to tell the truth. All of it. Not the version that makes you look like a man trying to save his family. The actual version. Then we're going to figure out together what happens next. Based on facts. Instead of whatever story gets you through the next 6 weeks. And if I don't come tomorrow, then you'll have decided, I said, standing, that the last 12 years of my daughter's trust wasn't worth one honest conversation. I think you already know how that decision looks. Sitting across from you. 41 years old. In a room this clean. I left him sitting there. The promissory note still on the desk. Renee's forged trust in the shape of an unwitnessed witness signature. Drove home slow, the fog just starting to burn off the water. Thinking about Alma. The letter. A frightened man in a good suit finally running out of suits to wear. That evening, Renee called. No careful voice this time, Just my daughter, raw, asking the question I'd been waiting 2 years for her to ask directly. Dad, did I really sign something today? Cole told me it was just a formality, some paperwork for the note you two were discussing. I didn't read it carefully. I trusted him. You signed a document as witness on a promissory note, I told her, gentle as I could make it, because there's no way to make this particular truth soft, only quieter. One that would have made me personally liable for $48,000 of his business debt. I didn't sign it. The silence on the line went on long enough I thought the call had dropped. How many things have I signed without reading, Dad? She finally said. Her voice cracked on it. The same crack Coles had at my kitchen table 2 days earlier. The sound of a person finally hearing the true size of something they'd been carrying blind. I don't know, I said. Honest, because I didn't. Not yet. Not until Marjorie finished the last of her review, but tomorrow we're going to find out together. All of it. No more signing anything you haven't read, Renee. Not ever again. I should have said that to you years ago. Why didn't you? I thought about that a long moment. It deserved an honest answer, not a reflexive one. Because I thought protecting you meant staying quiet, I said. Building a wall around Sam where Cole's choices couldn't reach him. I didn't understand, until recently, that it also meant telling you the truth, even when the truth might make you angry at me instead of him. Your mother would have told you sooner. She always said a soft heart needs a guard, not a wall. I built you a wall. I should have built you a guard. I'm scared, Dad, Renee said. Quiet. The girl on the workbench again. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to hear her clearly. I know, I said. Tomorrow's going to be hard. But it's going to be the last hard day where you don't know the whole truth. Every day after that, whatever happens with Cole, whatever happens with the business, you'll at least know exactly what you're standing on. That's worth something. I promise you that. She agreed to come tomorrow. I hung up and sat in my kitchen a long while, looking at the folder on the table, the deed, the trust, Alma's letter, the certified copies Marjorie had gathered. I thought about how a man spends 2 years reading grain, watching a crack travel slow and patient toward the surface. How strange it feels, the night before it finally breaks through, to discover the thing you'd been dreading most wasn't the crack at all. It was hoping, right up until the very last minute, that the people you loved could still be reached before it did. I called Denny that night too, mostly because I needed to hear an ordinary voice after a day that hadn't been ordinary at all. You ready for tomorrow? Denny asked. As ready as a man gets, I said. You did everything right, Owen, Denny said. 40 years I've known you. Never once seen you raise your voice at a soul. Never once seen you need to. Reading grain doesn't take volume, I said. Just patience. And the willingness to look at something long enough to see what's actually there, instead of what you're hoping is there. Alma would be proud of you, Denny said. Quiet. The truest thing anyone had said to me in longer than I could remember. She'd be proud of Sam, I said. That boy's the only one in this whole mess who never once needed reading. He's been clear as good pine from the day he was born. We said our goodnights. I went to bed early, knowing tomorrow would be long, knowing the folder was ready, knowing Marjorie would be there at 5, knowing that whatever happened at that table, I'd finally stopped carrying a weight I'd been holding up quietly, alone, for 2 full years, one plank at a time, waiting for the exact moment the whole structure could finally be seen clearly by everyone standing under it. Marjorie called me one final time that Sunday morning, before she drove down from Portland, something in her voice I hadn't heard from her before, a kind of gentleness she usually kept folded away under 30 years of careful legal language. Owen, she said, I've done a lot of these. Family confrontations, competency challenges, contested trusts. I want to tell you something before today, because I think you need to hear it from someone who isn't your daughter, your grandson, or your late wife's memory. Go ahead, you didn't do this to punish anyone, she said. I've watched men come into my office wanting exactly what you have today. Documentation, leverage, a clean win. Most of them wanted it because they were angry, because they wanted to see somebody suffer for what they'd done to them. You've never once, in 9 years, asked me a single question that came from anger. Every question you've ever asked me came from wanting to protect that boy. I think that matters. I think it's the reason today is going to go the way it's going to go. I sat with that a long moment, phone warm against my ear, looking out my kitchen window at the fog still sitting low on the water. I buried the only person who ever understood that about me, without my having to explain it, I said. It means something, hearing it from somebody else. She'd be proud of how you handled this, Marjorie said, for whatever a lawyer's opinion is worth on a thing like that. It's worth quite a bit, coming from you, I told her. We said our goodbyes. I spent the last hour before she arrived doing the only thing that ever actually settles me when everything else is loud. I went down to the shop. I hadn't planned to work, just needed to stand in that space, breathe the cedar and epoxy smell that never fully leaves a shop, no matter how many years pass. Run my hand along the old workbench where Alma once sat with her ledger. I found myself instead picking up a scrap of oak I'd been saving for no particular reason, running my thumb along the grain, feeling for the place it would eventually want to split. I thought about the first night Cole ever walked into that shop, 12 years back, admiring the shine on my tools, never asking what any of them were for. I thought about how long it took me to understand something. Some men only ever see the shine on a thing, never the function. A family like a whole is built entirely out of function, out of the parts nobody ever compliments because they're too busy holding the weight of everything else in place. I thought about Sam, 9 years old, already asking me to show him how to feel for the grain, already more interested in why a plank holds than in how it looks. Alma would have loved watching that boy grow up. She'd have taught him to keep a ledger by now, the way she taught me, one careful number at a time, until the whole picture finally made sense on a single page. I locked the shop at 4:30, walked back up to the house, the fog finally starting to lift off the water, a thin band of afternoon light breaking through over the harbour, the way it does most days by that hour. I thought, standing there in my own driveway, whatever happened at that table in an hour and a half, one thing was already settled. I'd done the only thing that ever actually mattered. I had protected the boy. Everything else, the deed, the trust, the forged signatures, the folder Marjorie was driving down with, all of it was just the paperwork, proving a decision I'd made with my hands and my heart 2 years before. Any of them knew there was anything left to fight about. Marjorie's car pulled into the driveway at 5 o'clock sharp, exactly as promised. I went inside to start the pot roast, because some things, even on the most consequential day of a 2-year quiet war, still need doing exactly the way they've always been done. Alma taught me that too, in her own way, over 30 years of ledgers and Sunday dinners, and a marriage built plank by careful plank. You keep doing the ordinary things, even on the extraordinary days. Especially on the extraordinary days. It's the only way a man stays steady enough to do what actually needs doing, when the moment finally arrives. I was setting the table when I heard Renee's car turn into the driveway. Right on time, 6 o'clock exactly. I stood there a moment with the last plate still in my hand, looking at the empty chair where Alma used to sit. I said, quiet, just to myself, just to her, wherever a woman like that ends up after 49 years of doing everything right. Last plank, I said. Watch this one land. Sunday came in grey and quiet, the kind of coastal morning where fog sits on the water till almost 10. You can hear the buoy bell out past the point before you can see anything at all. I spent the morning in the shop, not working, just being there, running my hand along the old workbench, the way I do when I need to think clearly about something that matters. Marjorie arrived at 5, an hour early, the way she does everything. We sat at my kitchen table, going through the folder one final time. The deed, the trust, Dr. Ansell's letter, the forged loan application, my butchered signature at the bottom, the affidavit, the lien filing from the Bangor supplier, the Rockland lease, its $19,000 deposit clause highlighted in yellow. I want to be clear about the order, Marjorie said. We let Cole talk first. Whatever he came prepared to say, whatever angle he's planning, we let him finish it completely. You don't interrupt a man who's busy handing you the exact rope he's going to hang his own argument with. That's always been my method, I said. I know, she said. I've watched you use it on me for 9 years. Then, when he's done, I'll ask about the loan. Not you. Me. It needs to come from outside counsel. Otherwise it reads as a family accusation instead of what it actually is. And Alma's letter? Marjorie looked at me a long moment. That's yours to decide, Owen. Some things a lawyer doesn't get a vote on. I'd already decided. Decided the night I read it. sitting in that hummed-out shop light. Hadn't said so to anyone yet, not even Marjorie. Some cards you hold until the exact second they do the most good and the least harm. I've been reading Grain long enough to know this was that second, coming fast. 6 o'clock and closing. Renee, Cole and Sam arrived at 6 sharp. Cole's easy smile back in full polish like Friday's kitchen conversation had never happened. Renee looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Sam hugged me around the middle, same as always since he was small enough that I had to bend down for it. We sat. I'd made a pot roast again. The same meal from the toast, though I hadn't planned that on purpose. It just turned out that way. Something almost funny about it if you squinted. The whole story circling back to the same dish. Cole waited until we were most of the way through the meal before he started in. Exactly the way I'd expected. Easing toward it, the way a man eases toward a diving board he's already regretting. "Owen," he said, I wanted to say. "In front of everybody, I know things have felt strained. I want you to know none of it comes from a bad place. We love you. We just want what's best." "I appreciate that," I said. "Let him keep going. A man building his own gallows deserves the courtesy of finishing the frame." "I know Marjorie's here as a family friend tonight," Cole went on, glancing at her. "But I hope we can also just talk honestly, about maybe getting some support in place. Not because anyone thinks less of you, because we love you and want to make sure everything's protected. The house, the accounts, everything you and Alma built." There it was. Everything you and Alma built. Said in the voice of a man already measuring it for a for sale sign. Renee's hand found Cole's under the table. I watched her do it. Watched my daughter reach for comfort toward the one person in that room least entitled to give it to her. Sam pushed peas around his plate, quiet, watching me the same way he had at that first dinner, like he already understood something didn't add up, even if nobody had given him the words for it yet. "Cole," I said, "before we go further, I want to ask Marjorie something, since she's here as counsel tonight. Not just a friend." Marjorie set down her fork. "Go ahead, Owen. There's a document I'd like you to explain to the table," I said. "The one you found at the bank on Congress Street." Cole's face didn't move, but his hand did. Just slightly. The fork tapping once against the plate before he caught it and stilled it. Marjorie reached into her bag and drew out a single folder. Thin. Unremarkable. The cane you'd never look twice at if you passed it on a desk. She set it on the table. Not sliding it toward anyone yet. Just setting it down flat. The way I'd set down the folded page at that first dinner. Months back. The toast that started all of this. "Last month," Marjorie said. Voice level. The voice she uses in front of judges. "A loan application was filed with First Coastal Bank on behalf of Paget Marine Outfitters. $9,000. It required a co-signer. The application lists Owen Garrity as that co-signer." Renee's face turned toward her husband, slow. The way a compass needle turns when it finally finds north, after spinning a long time, the wrong way. "Owen never signed that application," Marjorie continued. "I have a certified copy from the bank. An affidavit from the loan officer confirming the signature doesn't match Mr. Garrity's file, going back 4 decades of notarized documents. The bank has already flagged the file for internal review." The table went quiet. The particular quiet of a room where everyone's doing arithmetic they don't want the answer to. "That's a mistake," Cole said. "Too fast." The Polish gone from his voice entirely now. "A clerical error. Someone at the bank must have transposed something." "There's a second one," Marjorie said. Her voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. Just kept laying facts flat, the way I'd taught myself to do with everything for 50 years. A personal guarantee on a supplier credit line. $22,000. That one carries Renee's signature. Renee went very still. "I never signed anything for the business," she said. Quiet to Marjorie. Then slower, turning to Cole. "I never signed anything, Cole." "Renee, baby, let me explain." "Explain the $22,000, Renee said. I heard for the first time in longer than I could remember, something in my daughter's voice that wasn't careful, wasn't rehearsed, was just hers. Sam looked between his parents, fork forgotten on his plate, 9 years old and understanding, maybe for the first time. The adults at this table weren't as steady as he'd always assumed. I let the silence sit. I'd learned that from Alma's ledger, from 43 years of Grain, from every hard fact I'd ever laid on a table, and refused to decorate. Silence does more work than any speech I could give. It gives everyone a moment to hear their own thoughts. Sometimes what they hear scares them more than anything I could say out loud. I was going to fix it, Cole finally said. To Renee, not to me. Before anyone found out. I was going to pay it back the second Rockland turned a profit. It was never supposed to be a real problem. Just a bridge. A short-term thing. You forged my father's name, Renee said. You forged mine. I didn't have a choice, Cole said. His voice cracked on it. Cracked in a way that told me the man across the table wasn't performing anymore. Whatever was left of his composure had finally given out under the exact weight I'd watched building on him for 2 years. Ferris pulled out. The supplier's calling every week. I'm $19,000 into a deposit. I can't get back if the lease faults. I've got a family to think about. You had a family to think about, I said. First thing I'd said in several minutes. Quiet, flat, the way I say everything. And you decided the way to think about them was to steal their names. Cole looked at me then. Really looked. The way a man looks at someone he's finally understood he badly misjudged. Owen, I never meant for it to go this far. I swear to you. I believe you didn't mean for it to, I said. I don't believe that changes what it is. Marjorie slid a second document across the table. The notice of revocation. Formal. Dated. Witnessed. Ending any informal understanding of future family support. This is also relevant tonight, she said. Owen has asked me to formally document something. No further access exists, implicit or explicit, to any accounts, trusts or properties in the Garrity estate. This protects everyone at this table equally, including Renee. Going forward. Renee's eyes moved from the paper to me. For a moment I saw something in her face I hadn't seen since she was young enough to sit on my workbench. Not anger at me, fear maybe, of what came next. And under the fear, something that looked almost like relief. The particular relief of a person who's been carrying a weight they were never told the true size of. Finally sat down and measured, out loud, where they could see it. Dad, she said, how long have you known? I looked at my daughter, 31 years old, married 12, carrying a debt she never signed for. A husband who'd been drowning in silence rather than admit it. To the one man who could have actually helped him, if he'd only asked instead of stolen. Long enough, I said, to make sure none of it could ever touch Sam. That's all I ever set out to protect. And there at that table, folder open, Cole's hands flat and shaking slightly against the tablecloth, I understood something. We'd reached the moment I'd been building toward for 2 full years. The yard, the trust, the forged signatures, the lien, the lease. All of it about to come together into one single fact. A fact nobody at that table could argue with, walk back, or explain away. I reached into my jacket pocket and drew out one more folded page. I set it on the tablecloth. Same way I'd set the first one, months before, at the dinner where this whole thing started. Folded once, smoothed flat with 2 fingers. I didn't push it toward anyone. Just let it sit there, the way you let a fact sit when it's strong enough to do its own work. What is that? Cole said. His voice had nothing left in it now. No polish, no easy confidence. Just a man watching a wave he'd seen coming for weeks finally break over the bow. This is the deed to the Garrity Boatworks land, I said, recorded at the Cumberland County Registry 2 years ago. $630,000 sold to a marine restoration company out of Camden. You've been telling people, Cole, telling your business partner before he ran, telling Griggs at a Little League game, that this land was still mine to leave, still mine to hand down, still sitting there waiting to fund whatever you needed. It hasn't been mine in 2 years. It was never going to be yours. Renee reached for the page before Cole did. I watched her read it, watched her eyes move to the recorder's stamp, the date. 2 full years before Cole had ever mentioned Rockland to her. You sold the yard 2 years ago, Renee said. Not to me, to Cole. And you've been talking about it like it's still there this whole time. I didn't know, Cole said. Owen never told me. I never told you, I said, because it was never yours to be told. I told Renee the day it happened. She knows exactly when. Renee's face went through something complicated. She landed finally on the part that mattered most. You've been planning around money that hasn't existed for 2 years, she said to her husband. You forged my name and my father's name, chasing something that was already gone before you started. Marjorie set down the second document, the trust summary, unfolded it slow across the table so the whole page lay visible under the light. $590,000. The Alma Garrity Family Trust. Irrevocable. Sam named sole beneficiary at 25. Me, trustee until then. There's no path, Cole, Marjorie said. Calm. Professional. The voice she uses when she wants a fact to land without any heat attached. Under any circumstance, for you to access these funds. Not through marriage, not through guardianship, not through any petition a court would entertain. Given Dr. Ansell's documentation of Owen's full cognitive capacity. Dated, notarized, and already on file, Cole sat very still. I watched something happen in his face. I hadn't expected to feel anything about, and did anyway, despite everything. I'm not a man built to enjoy watching another man's structure finally give way, even a structure he built entirely out of lies. It's not in me. Never has been. There's one more thing, I said. This was the part I hadn't told Marjorie I was going to do, the part I decided alone in the shop, under that humming light. I reached into the folder one final time, drew out the smaller envelope, the one addressed in Alma's hand to Sam, still sealed. Sam, I said, this isn't for tonight. This is yours from your grandmother, for whenever you're old enough to want it. I'm not opening it. Just telling you it exists, so you always know she left you something with her own hand. It's waiting whenever you're ready. Sam looked at the envelope like it might be something alive. What's in it? He asked. Small. I don't know, I told him. Honest, because I didn't. Something clean about admitting that out loud after 2 years of secrets in that house. That's between you and her. Someday you'll open it, and you'll know. Cole put his head in his hands. Not performing now. A man out of moves, out of rope, out of the polish that had carried him through 12 years of a marriage he'd never quite earned the right to. What happens now? Renee asked. Quiet, looking at Marjorie, then at me. That's the part that's up to Cole, I said. The forgery I've chosen not to pursue criminally. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I don't want my grandson visiting his father through glass over $9,000. But the bank will conduct its own review regardless. The supplier's lien is already public record. The Rockland lease will very likely fold on its own. That deposit is already gone. Whatever anyone does tonight. None of that is a punishment I'm handing down. It's just what happens when a man builds a business on money he never had, and names he was never given permission to use. And us, Renee said. Me and Sam. I looked at my daughter, 31 years old. Saw for a moment the whole arc of her. The girl on the workbench, the bride at her wedding, the woman who'd gone quiet for 12 years rather than risk a life she'd been told she was lucky to have. You and Sam were never on trial here, I said. I built everything I built for one reason. So whatever happened to Cole's business, whatever happened to his choices, it could never touch either of you. That's still true tonight. It was true the day I signed the trust. Nothing that happened at this table changes what's already protected. Marjorie began quietly gathering the documents, sliding each one back into its folder with the care she'd use with a physical exhibit in a courtroom, because in a sense that's exactly what they were. Cole didn't argue when she asked him to sign a simple acknowledgement, that he'd received copies, that he understood the trust's terms, that no further claim existed or would be pursued. He signed it with a hand that wasn't entirely steady. The signature, I noticed without meaning to, matched the one on file. His real one, the one he hadn't used when he'd needed my name, and Renee's instead of his own. Sam had gone quiet at the far end of the table, the sealed envelope held carefully in both hands like it might bruise if he gripped it wrong. I got up, walked around, put my hand on his shoulder the way I had at that very first dinner. The toast, the peas pushed around a plate. A boy who'd understood something didn't add up before anyone gave him the words. You did good tonight, I told him. Quiet, just for him. You didn't need to do anything. Just sitting there being who you are. That's the whole reason any of this mattered to me. He leaned into my hand a little, the way he used to, back when he was small enough to fall asleep against my shoulder, driving home from the boatyard. Renee stood, walked to Cole's side of the table, and put a hand on his shoulder too. Not the reflexive comfort from earlier in the evening. Something more careful, more considered. The hand of a woman deciding, in real time, what kind of wife she'd be to the man across from her now. now that she finally understood exactly what he'd done and what he hadn't told her. "We need to talk," she told him. "Just us. Tonight." "Renee, I'm so sorry," Cole said. Cole. For the first time all evening, I believed the sentence coming out of his mouth. Believed it the way you believe a plank has finally reached the place it was always going to split. Nothing left to do but watch which direction the crack runs. They left not long after. Sam's hand in Renee's, the envelope tucked carefully into his jacket pocket. Cole trailing a step behind, saying nothing else. His easy smile gone entirely, replaced by something new. For the first time in 12 years, an honest reckoning. With the size of what he'd actually built his life on top of. Marjorie stayed another 20 minutes, finishing her coffee, watching me the way she does when she's deciding whether a client needs a lawyer's counsel or just a friend's company. "You did that exactly right," she said finally. "The envelope." That was the part I wasn't expecting. "Alma would have wanted him to have it regardless of how tonight went," I said. "That letter was never a weapon. It was always just his." "For what it's worth," Marjorie said, standing, gathering her coat. "I've done this kind of evening more times than I can count, in 30 years of practice. Most people don't manage what you managed tonight. Most people either fold entirely or come out swinging. You just laid the facts down and let them do the work. That's all I've ever known how to do," I said. "Read the grain, set it down flat." "Wait." She let herself out. I sat alone at my kitchen table a long while. The dishes from dinner still sitting where they'd been abandoned. The pot roast gone cold, same as it had the night of the first toast. I thought about Alma, the ledger. 30 years of numbers that always, eventually, added up to something true. The weeks that followed moved slower than I expected, and faster too. The strange way time does after something you've braced for finally happens, and the bracing turns out to have been the hardest part. The bank's internal review confirmed everything within 10 days. Cole's forged signature on my loan application, mine and Renee's both, got flagged formally. First Coastal chose, in the end, not to refer it for criminal prosecution, largely because I asked them not to, in writing, through Marjorie. Citing my grandson's well-being, the bank closed the line of credit instead. Called the note, Cole was left personally liable for the full $9,000. No business shield left to hide behind. He paid it in installments, slow, out of what remained of his salary, once Rockland finally folded. The Rockland lease defaulted 3 weeks after that Sunday dinner, exactly as Marjorie predicted. Paget Marine Outfitters forfeited the full $19,000 deposit. The Bangor supplier's lien moved forward against what remained of the existing store's inventory. $26,000 of tools and parts seized and auctioned to satisfy the debt. Cole kept the original storefront. Barely. Half the space he used to run. No partner. No more talk at family dinners about expansion. Ferris, his former partner, sent Renee a brief, almost apologetic message a month later. Explained he'd pulled out the moment he learned Cole had forged a guarantee using his own wife's name. "I didn't want any part of a business built like that," he wrote. "Frankly, Renee, neither should you." Renee showed me that message herself, sitting at my kitchen table, 3 weeks after the dinner. I watched my daughter read her own outrage back to herself in another man's plain words. Something in her face settled that hadn't settled in years. Renee and Cole didn't divorce. Not right away. I want to be honest, I don't know, even now, whether they will eventually. What I do know is my daughter stopped signing anything she hadn't read herself, cover to cover, twice out loud if she needed to. She enrolled in a bookkeeping course at the community college in Portland that fall. The same kind of careful, patient work her mother did for 30 years at that same kitchen table. She told me the day she signed up exactly why. She wanted to understand her own family's numbers, well enough that nobody could ever tell her a story, instead of showing her the truth. Cole got a job managing inventory at a marine supply warehouse 2 towns over. A step down from owning his own outfit. A step, I think, toward becoming the kind of man who understands what it actually costs to build something, instead of just admiring the shine on somebody else's work. He came to see me alone once, about 2 months after that dinner, stood on my porch the way he had the Friday before everything broke open. Except this time there was no polish in him at all. Just a tired man who'd finally run out of stories to tell himself. "I don't expect you to forgive what I did," he said. "I just wanted you to know I understand it Now. All of it. What it actually cost. I'm not in the business of forgiving debts I don't hold, I told him. Honest, because that was the truest thing I had to offer him. The debt you owe isn't to me, it's to my daughter and to that boy. It's not the kind you pay off in installments. It's the kind you pay off by being a different man than the one who forged those signatures. I can't tell you whether you'll manage that. Only you can tell me. And only over time. Only by doing it, not by saying it on a porch. He nodded, took that the way a man takes a plain fact laid flat in front of him, left without arguing. That told me more than any apology could have. The Elder Dignity file never had to be used the way I'd feared. Dr. Ansell's letter, the notebook full of dated incidents, Griggs's willingness to say what he'd heard at that ball game. None of it ever needed to leave my desk drawer for a courtroom. I've never once regretted the hours I spent building that file. A man who prepares for a fight he never has to fight has still won something, even if nobody ever sees the winning. 6 weeks after the dinner, Sam finally opened his grandmother's letter. He asked me to be there when he did it, sitting at my kitchen table. The same table. The envelope in his hands, the way he'd held it that Sunday night. Careful, like it might bruise. Inside was a single page. Alma's handwriting, smaller and more careful than even her letter to me. The way you write when you're writing for a child you'll never get to watch grow into the person reading it. Dear Sam, I never got to meet you, but I knew your grandfather would build you a life worth having. The same way he built everything else, with his own 2 hands and more patience than most men ever manage. If you're reading this, you're probably old enough now to understand something. Some of the people who loved you loudest never got the chance to say so out loud. I'm one of them. I want you to know 2 things. First, a person's worth was never measured by how loud they could talk or how much they could take. It's measured by how carefully they built things that would still be standing long after they were gone. Your grandfather taught me that. I hope somewhere along the way, he taught it to you too. Second, I want you to remember the grain, whatever your grandfather taught you about wood, about running your fingers along it, about feeling for the place it's going to split before you ever put weight on it. That's not really about wood at all. It's about people. It's about paying attention long enough to see who's actually solid and who only looks that way from a distance. Trust the ones who are solid all the way through. There won't be many. That's all right. You only need a few. I love you more than this letter can hold. Go build something good, Grandma Alma Sam cried. The way a 9-year-old cries when a piece of love finally reaches him from somewhere he can't see. I held him the way I'd held Renee at that same age. Thought about a woman who'd known even before her own death that the truest inheritance a person can leave behind isn't money at all. It's instruction. A way of seeing clearly enough to survive whatever comes after you're gone. I set up a small account for Sam that same month, separate from the trust, funded modestly, $8,000, meant for the trade school of his choosing, whenever he's ready. I want him to have the option his grandmother and I built our whole life around, the option to make something with his own hands and know exactly what it's worth, because he's the one who built it. Renee started coming by the shop again, most Saturdays, sometimes with Sam, sometimes alone. We don't talk much about coal on those visits. We talk about the boats I used to build, about her mother's ledger, about the way light falls through the big doors in the late afternoon, the same way it's fallen for 43 years. Some Saturdays she brings her own coffee, just sits at the old workbench, the one Alma used to sit at, doing the reading for her course. I sand something that doesn't need sanding, just to have my hands busy while my daughter fills a room I'd started to think would stay quiet the rest of my life. Last month, Sam asked me to teach him to read the grain properly, not the way I'd shown him before, quick in passing, the real way, the way my own father taught me, standing over a plank for an hour until you finally feel the exact place it wants to give. I took him down to the shop on a Saturday morning, laid a fresh piece of white oak across the bench, put his small hand under mine, guided his fingers slow along the surface. Feel that, I said. Right there, feel how it changes. He was quiet a long moment, concentrating hard, the way his mother used to when she was small, memorizing tool names like a spell. Then his eyes went wide. There, he said. Right there, it feels different. That's it, I told him. That's the whole trick, Sam. You just have to be patient enough to notice. Most people aren't. Most people go their whole lives never once stopping long enough to feel where the weight's actually landing. Is that how you knew about Dad? He asked, Careful, the way a boy asks a question he's been sitting with a while before he finally says it out loud. That's exactly how I knew, I said. I didn't get angry. Didn't need to. I just paid attention. Longer than anybody expected me to. Until the truth had nowhere left to hide. He nodded. The way a boy nods when an answer finally makes a piece of the world make sense. Went back to running his fingers along the plank. Patient. Careful. His grandmother's daughter's son, learning the only inheritance that ever really mattered in our family. I'm 73 years old now, going on 74 this winter. I've buried a wife, built and sold a business, raised a daughter who's still learning how to trust her own judgment, stopped a family from being quietly dismantled by a man who mistook shine for substance. I never raised my voice through any of it. I never needed to. People ask me sometimes, around town, at the diner with Denny, at the hardware store, what it felt like finally setting that folded page down on my own tablecloth and watching everything unfold from there. I tell them the truth, same as I've told you. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like finishing a piece of work I'd started decades earlier. One careful measurement at a time. The same way you finish any hull worth building. You don't rush it. You don't force it. You read the grain. You trust what your hands already know. Eventually, if you've done the work right, the whole structure holds exactly the weight it was always meant to carry. Alma used to say the ground should go to whoever's still standing on it in 30 years. My grandson is 9 years old, standing in my shop on a Saturday morning, hands steady under mine, learning to feel for the truth in a piece of wood, the same patient way his grandmother once found it in a church ledger. I intend to still be standing right there beside him. However many mornings I've got left, I plan to spend every one of them exactly the same way I spent the last 50. Quiet, patient, reading the grain, long before anyone else even knows there's a crack coming. I want to close out the numbers properly, the way Alma always insisted a story about money should close. The full picture, visible on one page, instead of scattered across a dozen half-told conversations. The yard and land sold for $630,000. $590,000 of that went into Sam's trust after closing costs. It sits there still, untouched, growing slow and steady, the way Marjorie structured it to grow. Waiting for a 25-year-old version of my grandson I likely won't live to see, though I intend to try. The house on Widow's Point Road, still mine, still standing. Worth roughly $375,000 now, on a market that keeps climbing along this stretch of coast. My retirement and investment accounts, another $410,000. Untouched by anything Cole ever attempted, Marjorie built every wall around them 9 years before he ever needed one built. Cole's total exposure, once everything settled, came to just over $300,000. $260,000 in Rockland build-out debt. $48,000 owed the Bangor supplier. The $19,000 deposit forfeited outright. The $9,000 forged against my name, which he eventually repaid himself, in full, over 14 months. The last payment arrived the same week Sam turned 10. Marjorie's retainer over the whole ordeal came to just under $6,000, beyond her original 9 years of service. The cheapest insurance I've ever purchased, against losing everything Alma and I built with our own hands. The scholarship fund I quietly started for Sam's trade school, $8,000, separate from the trust, has already grown. Just over $9,000 now. I've kept adding to it. A little every month. The same slow, patient way I've done everything in my life that turned out to matter. I plan to keep adding until the day he's old enough to use it. Whatever trade he chooses. Whether it's boats or something else entirely. Alma's ring, appraised once years ago at $6,200, still sits in my safe deposit box in Portland. Untouched. Meant for whoever Sam eventually marries. If he marries. If the family he builds ever earns the kind of trust that ring deserves to represent. I paid off Renee's car that spring too, quietly, the way I'd done once before without Cole ever knowing. $600 this time, for a transmission repair she'd been putting off. The household budget, still recovering from Cole's collapsed venture, didn't have the room for it. She found out only when the shop called to confirm the pickup. She cried on my porch about it. Not because $600 is a fortune. It was proof, plain and simple. Her father had never once stopped quietly holding up whatever corner of her life needed holding. Even during the 2 years he'd been forced to hold it from a careful distance. Denny Furlong still meets me at the diner on Front Street every other Wednesday. Same booth, same eggs, same slow coffee. He still hears everything that moves through this harbour town before I do. He told me last month that word's finally gotten around. Quiet, the way real respect moves through a small place. Old Owen Garrity handled his son-in-law's mess without ever once raising his voice, without ever once making his own daughter choose a side in public, without ever once needing more than a folder and a patient 2 years of watching. You could have ruined that boy, Denny said, stirring his coffee slow. Had every right to. Nobody in this town would have blamed you. Ruining him doesn't unforge a signature, I told him. It just adds another broken thing to a pile that already had enough broken things in it. I'd rather he spend the next 20 years proving me wrong about him than spend one day in a courtroom proving me right. Denny nodded at that, the way a man nods at something he already half believed himself. We finished our eggs and talked instead about the weather coming in off the water. Ordinary things, the kind of Wednesday morning conversation a life well built eventually earns you the right back to. I think about Alma every single day, same as I always have, differently now than I did the first 6 years after she died. I used to think about her mostly in grief. The empty chair, the cold coffee, the handprint in the concrete I'd sometimes go press my own palm against just to feel closer to her. Now I think about her mostly in gratitude. Everything she saw clearly, 5 years before her death, over one uncomfortable dinner about money, turned out to matter more than either of us could have known. She read the grain of a 29-year-old man the very first night she met him, filed it away without a word of accusation, left me, in the end, with exactly the instructions I needed to finish the job right. I don't know what the next chapter looks like. For Renee, for Cole, for whatever shape their marriage eventually settles into. I've stopped needing to know. My job was never to control the outcome. It was only ever to make sure the outcome couldn't touch one person, the one who never asked for any part of it, and couldn't erase the woman who built half of everything I am, with a pencil, a ledger, and 49 years of seeing people more clearly than they ever saw themselves. Sam's out in the shop most Saturdays now, running his fingers along fresh planks, learning to feel for what's solid and what only looks that way. I watch him sometimes from the doorway before I go in to join him. I think, there he is, standing on ground his grandmother told me to protect. All those years ago, leave it to whoever's still standing on it in 30 years. He's 9 years old. Already he's exactly that, steady, patient, learning to read the grain before anyone ever has to teach him the hard way why it matters. That's the whole inheritance, in the end. Not the house, not the trust, not even the yard I built with my own 2 hands over 43 years. Just that, a boy who knows how to look closely enough at something to see what's actually there, long before anyone else in the room even notices the crack is coming. Alma would have called that the only ledger that ever mattered. Numbers on a page fade, a boy who reads people the way his grandmother read a church collection plate. Careful, patient, unwilling to let a false sum slide past him. That never fades. That's the sum I set out to protect the whole time, long before I ever knew the shape it would finally take. I still lock the shop doors the same way every night. Same 2 turns of the key Alma watched me do for 30 years. Some nights, walking back to the house, I stop halfway up the path and just listen to the harbour settle. The bellbuoy, a gull somewhere out past the point. Cutter's Notch doesn't change much, and I've stopped wanting it to. Whatever comes next. For Renee, for Cole, for the boy learning to read grain in my shop, I intend to meet it the same old way. The way I've met everything since I married a woman who could spot a bad number from across a folding table. Quiet, patient, steady on my feet, watching for the hairline crack long before anyone else even knows to look for it.